Genshin Impact+no system+battle upgrade+multiple female masters, Chuan has become an ordinary soldier on the island. He has no system and no ring grandfather. Only his predecessor can be regarded as an excellent talent for sword practice among ordinary people. Coming from time to time, he did not want mediocrity. He wanted to go against the current, silently practice, accumulate knowledge and make progress. One day, he will break through the boundaries of mortals, become an immortal on the ground, and use his fingers to destroy the gods. When I am not here, they hold the life and death of all beings, manipulate the 7 gods, and overturn the starry sky. Now, I am here. The dark history of thousands of years ago will not happen again, and the kingdom on earth will always stand and not sink. Coming through time is not for the sake of disappearing from the crowd. Evil eyes erode, I survive on my own. The only sword to accompany a strong enemy. Demon god resurrected, world line changed. Who said that ordinary people cannot wield their swords to ascend to heaven? Chapter 1. Cutting Steel Flash. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Inami's wife, Heizashima. The distant sky shimmered with purple thunder, enveloping the world. In a military camp at the headquarters of the resistance forces on Heizashima Island. A group of injured or young rebel soldiers were leaning together, hunching their shoulders and looking out at the center of the martial arts arena. There are 2 young figures who are not much different in age from them and have already gained a certain reputation in the resistance army, constantly clashing with each other, shining with swords and shadows. Both of them were in their early 20s in the field, with a figure on the right dressed in a blue shirt and ordinary short hair. They stood tall and straight like a pine tree, with a calm expression. He wielded his standard long sword with a sense of awkwardness, and every round of confrontation, he would be caught by loopholes and retreat in succession. However, although he was suppressed, he seemed to have a sense of spirituality. Every time his opponent's sword was about to hit his neck, he almost turned the situation around and managed to deal with it with both danger and danger. This also made the man on the right, who always tried his best to show off his skills, grit his teeth, clearly having an advantage, but it was difficult to end the battle. Chuan, put in more effort. Don't be killed by your own team members again. Among the 2, it turns out that the former, who is at a disadvantage, is more popular in this military camp. This is somewhat related to his identity. The captain of the Carp team. Previously, Chuan indeed held important positions in the resistance army at a young age. The handsome man in front of him is also one of his team members and good brothers, Changyu. Brother Chuan, I won't let you down just because your injury has just healed. Look at the sword. In the resistance army of Heizashima, a master swordsman was specially hired to develop swordsmanship for the entire resistance army and systematically teach it to them. The cost paid by the Coral Palace for this is not low, but it has been effectively implemented. In the short 2 wars between the resistance army and the shogunate, the victory of the weaker side's resistance army proved this point. At this moment, Chuan saw at a glance that the trajectory of Changyu's strike was one of the closing ceremonies of the abyss and sea's flow, with mountains and rivers returning. It seems that my brother was suppressed miserably before, and now he urgently needs to regain his confidence. Since that's the case, Chuan turned sideways and put on an inexplicable posture. Watching the young man with short hair, who remained calm in the martial arts arena, change his movements, the soldiers outside couldn't help but tug at the corners of their mouths. Come again. This former captain of the Special Operations Team is a highly skilled elite with a solid foundation. His swordsmanship talent was once recognized by Kitagawa Nagahiro, who served as the general instructor of the resistance army and also as the guest minister of Heizashima Island, and was also praised by Lord Goro. But now, after being seriously injured and unconscious by a shogunate samurai on the battlefield, he has completely changed his appearance. His swordsmanship no longer remained calm and powerful, and his swordsmanship became inexplicable. It can be said that the reason why Changyu was able to win against him multiple times is closely related to his no longer using the general tactics taught by the military to respond to Changyu's attacks. Changyu instinctively frowned as he looked ahead at Chuan's sword-holding posture. What is this time again? Some of them are like the thrusts in the basic starting style of the abyssal current, but the posture deviation is significant. I can't understand anymore. He was a bit annoyed by the decadence of his captain, who was unable to recover just because of one setback. How could this casual action break through his long-established combo? Since that's the case, I'll accept this victory. Changyu suddenly leaned forward and swept out like a falcon, forming an angle between his steps and body orientation, completely blocking Chuan's course of action. The Shanhagui style, although it is a single-kill move, has a lot of changes on the battlefield and is a versatile move. When he arrived at Chuan like the sword wind of a large army, all the changes were unnecessary. Chuan must use his own strength to deal with the blow he is charging forward. Both sides are ordinary, and in this situation, it is difficult for Chuan to resist. Anyone in the field who possesses certain knowledge of swordsmanship already has the answer to this battle in their heart. By casually breaking through and accumulating momentum, one can hone one's own skills to at least the level of Master Beichuan. Weapon collision. Chuan stood sideways, attempting to break through the surface with a dot. But his strength was insufficient, and he stumbled backwards, losing balance all over. Changyu squinted his eyes and rolled his wrist, his sword being swung up again, its momentum increasing instead of decreasing. Chuan blocks again, take 4 steps back. Then a series of collision sounds exploded like firecrackers. Changyu's sword meandered like flowing water, shifting from upward to horizontal and then to scattered arc light. At the same time, each blow is as heavy as a mountain. This is the improvement brought to them by the exquisite and unparalleled sword genre. The sword in their hands is not only a weapon, but also a tool to stimulate their own strength. On the other hand, Chuan's defensive posture is weak and has retreated to the edge of the school field. The soldiers who were watching no longer looked into the field. This was supposed to be a game of vastly different strengths, but in the end it turned into a game of vastly different strengths. The veterans began to review the new recruits, and they must not learn from Chuan on the battlefield, otherwise no matter how strong they are, they will die in the waves. End. The last sword. Accompanied by a sword swing, Changyu's long breath also poured out. In front of him, Chuan's eyes lit up with a sudden leap, and he unexpectedly collided with his long sword. The sword is a dull sword used for practice, and it won't kill anyone, but Changyu keenly sensed that Chuan's route would be dangerous and avoid the long sword. I want to hide. You can't overturn in the sewer. Changyu shouted loudly, his breath instantly disrupted, but the path of the sword changed and caught up with the rapidly increasing speed of Chuan. In an instant, the winner is determined. Changyu's cheers brought the scattered soldiers back. The soldiers stared intently for a moment. After a moment of silence, my gaze diverged once again. I'm telling you, when you go to the battlefield and see someone playing like this, don't ask, just charge forward and chop. This is a reward for nothing. After 2.5 years of hard practice in swordsmanship, he is stronger than his opponent in all aspects. His advantage lies in how he loses. Do you understand now? The new recruits outside nodded like pecking rice. Vegetables are not a sin, waves are. Changyu gasped for breath and turned his head to look at Chuan, who was clutching his waist and slowly climbing up from the ground with a disheveled face. If it were a real sword just now, you would have been beheaded. Now you should understand. Keep pursuing that elusive thing, you haven't even had a chance to fight Takeda Market. Patting the dust on his simple green shirt, Chuan smiled and said, maybe, but whether or not he can beat Takeda village is not much different. Changyu clenched his fist, his eyes slightly red. The difference is not significant. Not big. Chuan shook his head. Abyssal Current is a basic swordsmanship and does not possess the ability to kill enemies at a higher level. Takeda Ruins is just a small centurion within the Haiji Island Rebellion, while Tivit is very large. So what? You need to create your own genre so that you can become stronger. Chuan thought for a moment and said, not necessarily, but it has a greater chance than the Abyssal Current. Stubborn and inflexible. Chanyu felt a bit resentful, but at the same time helpless. 4 days later, Hakujima will send Master Kitagawa to the shogunate. Do you know this news? He and Chuan slowly walked to the edge of the school field. At this moment, another group of people entered the school field, put on their posture, and a new shout and cheering came. I have heard of it. Chuan was taken aback and replied, 8 rebel soldiers will be sent along. Our special team should have a higher chance. Why, do you want to go? Chanyu said with resentment, I'm asking if you're going. Aren't you going to practice your broken swordsmanship? Now there's a chance to consult Master Beichuan and let him personally guide you. How could you miss this opportunity? Chuan was taken aback. Indeed, he had overlooked this point. If there is a master of swordsmanship to provide guidance, it is better than building a car in isolation. So he said seriously, of course I will go, I'm just asking for your thoughts. It's more convenient for 2 people to act together. However, entering the selection process is not easy. There are 7 or 8 special teams on our North Road, and with those 10 or so centurions included, the competition may be very fierce, sighed Changyu. Don't worry, the other teams are not facing disbandment like us. They have tasks on their hands and don't even have a chance to compete with us. It makes sense. Between their laughter and conversation, an untimely voice interrupted the gradually improving atmosphere. I don't think that's true. A few bereaved dogs who barely survived on the battlefield. It's fine if Lord Wulong didn't punish you with military law. Now, you still want to join Lord Beichuan's mission. You're not fooled by someone. Talk in your dreams during this broad day. They looked up and saw a young man in coarse cloth leaning against the outer wall of the schoolyard, throwing a stone with one hand and not looking at them as he muttered to himself. Harada, I see your skin is itching again. Chanyu grinned and rolled up his sleeves directly. This guy is the standard dog leg of Takeda village. He used to fight against them before. He was scolded for his cold words, but it wasn't long before his scars healed and he forgot about the pain. Grab his shoulder with one hand. Pay attention to your identity as a Chanyu team member. Chanyu turned his head in disbelief. I saw Chuan Shishiren walking forward without even glancing at Harada, speaking to himself. We are members of the Special Operations Team and have shed blood and sweat on the battlefield. Even if we are currently in private time, we have no obligation to talk nonsense to him like a small ordinary soldier who has been fighting on the battlefield. If there are any problems, we can talk to his superiors later. He is not level enough. The disdain between the words is only much more than Harada's previous tone, and even the indifferent attitude is more maddening. The captain is right. He came here to challenge our Special Operations Team for his identity. Chanyu then realized and laughed heartily, casually sweeping the ethereal dust on his shoulder. The two of them crossed directly from Harada's side, and this way of aligning instantly shattered Harada's youthful and energetic mentality. Since becoming a dog leg in Takeda Market, when has he ever been so angry? Chuan. You are a useless person who cannot be protected by your own team members. You have been severely injured by the shogunate warriors. What qualifications do you have to bark at here? Even the Special Operations Team, you should die on the battlefield as soon as possible. Don't cause trouble for your flower vase sister. Chuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he strode forward, his steps no longer light. Let's go, he whispered to Chanyu. Fighting is not good. Initially, Chanyu beat Harada and received a heavy military penalty. This is a pure disgusting person. Harada knows he won't be treated badly. He will be beaten, favored by Takeda Su, and can also use military rules to punish the opponent. A business that harms 1,000 enemies and self-harms 800 without losing. To deal with such people, either ignore them or fight to the death. A mangy dog will not remember pain because it only has food to eat after barking away people. The two of them left, but Harada's anger grew stronger behind him. This pure disregard made him feel that his tiny dignity was greatly insulted. Thinking back to the scene I saw on the campus earlier, Chuan's combat ability was countless times weaker than before. His brain was filled with blood and energy, and he suddenly became difficult. He picked up the wooden stick next to him and rushed forward. Chuan, what kind of thing are you? How dare you look down on me? Harada made up his mind that Nejiu could not kill him. This time, as long as he replicated his previous experience, he would not be at a disadvantage, and even hit Chuan's head with a stick. Over time, no one dares to look down on him. He fights for breath, and he works hard for Takeda market, not to become increasingly lowly. In front of him, Chuan had already been annoyed by his three-line mockery, just like online keyboard warriors before. They wouldn't just criticize you, they would try their best to greet all relatives and friends related to you. In the past, there was a sound legal system, but now in a country where all the gods follow their will, how dare you speak like that? Just as he was still thinking about how to make Harada leave less respectable in the future, this kid actually brought him to his door. Everyone is the beneficiary of the Abyss and Seas current, and Chuan, as one of the outstanding players who has been praised by multiple experts, has basic skills above most people on Haijiu Island. At this moment, even with his back to Harada and his focus solely on listening to the footsteps he made as he moved, Chuan had a feeling of knowing the other person's movements in his heart. Without him, only hands are familiar. The footsteps behind him were two deep and one shallow, followed by a clear high jump, and the sound of the wind dancing with the stick hit the center. It was clearly a small killing move in the Abyss and Seas current. Wave killing. Changguang only realized during Harada's speech that this old six was carrying out a surprise attack, and as early as Harada took the second step, Chuan's hand had already been pressed onto the hilt of the sword. Harada, you're bold. Before Changguang could finish speaking, he saw a scene that shocked him immensely. Chuan, who was originally walking side by side with him, turned around and took a step back to lower his body. He grabbed the scabbard with his left hand and the hilt with his right hand. As soon as Harada's wooden stick emptied and he adjusted his center of gravity on the ground, a fierce gust of wind shot out, and a silver-white light and shadow instantly pressed against Harada's throat. A trace of blood flowed from it onto the long sword. Hands. Show mercy. On the side of Chuan, Changguang struggled to shift his gaze from the red-pointed sword to Chuan. He just turned his head, and the Chuan sword had already defeated the enemy. Chuan looked at Harada, who was scared out of his wits in an instant, without any hesitation, and released his killing intent. Do you think the rebels will heavily punish a former Special Operations Team captain who mistakenly killed a spy for being a suspected shogunate spy? At the moment when Harada was held against his throat by the long sword, he was already confused. The fierce sword wind made him think he was about to die. At this moment, he couldn't feel the pain of piercing the skin in his throat, nor could he handle the message from Chuan. His brain was completely shut down and he kept murmuring. Spare my life. Spare my life. Chuan looked at the yellow liquid flowing from his pants legs to the ground with disgust and said coldly, Get out. Harada, as granted amnesty, shrank his head and turned around, clutching a stick and dodging away like a mollusk. Brother Chuan, your sword. Isn't it the abyssal current? Changguang hesitated for a long time but didn't regain his senses. This exquisite and unparalleled sword has the destructive power of a killing move, but there is no preemptive accumulation action. Chuan shook his head, caressed the blade, closed his eyes, and reminisced about the feeling just now, with a smile on his lips. Perhaps I have a clue. Chapter 2. Takeda Village. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Cover protagonist image. As the sky gradually darkened, the witch Firefly Grass at the Coral Palace Shrine finished organizing the booklet in her hand, looked up, raised her hands, and stretched her muscles and bones. She stood up holding the hem of the witch's robe and walked to the carved window made of tsuehua wood, gently opening a corner. Looking up, the pale halo occasionally illuminated the distant seawater, followed by a rumbling sound like a war drum from afar. Fortunately, the ancient rock walls surrounding it firmly surround the Coral Palace, which gives the Firefly a strong sense of security. Like the body of the great god Weian, even though he has passed away, he still protects his people. This war will also come to an end soon. Rekindling her spirits, Inchao picked up the booklet and walked out of the workshop towards the room located directly behind the center of the Coral Palace Shrine. Please come in. After knocking on the door, a pleasant sound came from the room. Inchao walked in with her head down. Even though she had been working for this adult for a long time, she was still a bit reserved. Lord Coral Palace, this is the current food stock and the consumption of the resistance army in the coming months. Sitting behind the table in front of the Coral Palace Heart Sea, Inchao smiled kindly and reached out to take the report, carefully flipping through it. And military pay, according to the system, how long can Haiji Island's finances last? Inchao quickly stepped forward and handed out another booklet, but her little face couldn't help but become depressed. In terms of finance and food, if distributed as usual, it may only last until the end of this month. Although I have full confidence in Lord Coral Palace, these data really make it difficult for me to pick myself up. Even the Coral Palace witch, who is so determined, is like this. If those rebel forces were to know that the financial situation of Haiji Island has been in such a difficult situation, it is likely that there will be a mutiny within the army in no time. Everyone is fighting for the island and their own future, but a war that is clearly going to fail and result in death may not be a wise choice for most people. Inchao watched anxiously as the Heart Sea of Coral Palace slowly flipped through these booklets. The latter's face remained consistent, his pure white hands were very calm, and the corners of his mouth even slightly raised. It was not like a smile, but a strong confidence and enough chance of winning this victory that is not expressed in words has unconsciously infected Firefly Grass. Why is this? The young witch girl is somewhat puzzled. Perhaps this is the so-called leadership temperament. Just as Inchao's mood gradually calmed down, Coral Palace Shinhai suddenly spoke up and said, Inchao, are you interested in going to Mingshan Island in 4 days? Ah! Inchao suddenly lifted her head and met her pair of watery eyes. In the gentle pink-blue pupils, there seemed to be wisdom that she could not reach. Lord Takeda, that's exactly what I said yesterday. In a military camp of the resistance army, the people around have been driven far away, and ordinary soldiers cannot even enter Takeda Centurion's territory. Even in the military, this place feels like a private territory. Harada cried loudly here with peace of mind. That bastard just put his sword against my neck. If it weren't for my quick reaction, I might not have seen you. Harada vividly described yesterday's encounter, while quietly observing the tall man sitting at the top with the remaining light of his eyes. I heard their conversation, as if they were going to use the envoy to the shogunate to find Master Nagahiro Kitagawa to deal with you. Such despicable behavior, you must stop them. Takeda remained expressionless in his seat, and the invisible pressure made the Harada vest sweat a bit. He couldn't grasp the other person's thoughts. After a while, Takeda Su waved his hand and said, all right, you go out. Sir. I already know. At this moment, the middle-aged man sitting in the second seat stood up and walked to Harada's side. He had a smile on his face and was gentle and refined. Lord Takeda already understands that he will take care of this matter. Mr. Harada must have suffered a lot from it, so please make sure we compensate him a little. The middle-aged person's behavior is very appropriate, and the momentum of great respect for Harada is exactly what Harada has been dreaming of. So he was almost moved to tears, with an excited feeling of wanting to die for Takeda village. He followed the middle-aged man out in a daze. After a long time, the middle-aged man walked back to the camp. This kind of opportunistic villain should not be allowed to join my camp. When the middle-aged man nodded and signaled that it had been dealt with, Takeda Su immediately spoke up. Number 34, Lord Takeda's words are not accurate. Everyone has their own value, and besides, Mr. Harada is only working towards his goals. Number 34, the middle-aged man offered warm tea to Takeda village and behaved appropriately. On this point, your older brother, Lord Changguang, has more insight. This is also why even in the powerful sect like Mingshan Island, there are so many people following him. Takeda Su impatiently waved his hand and said, the weak should have the consciousness of the weak. If Harada helps me stop those famous warriors on the battlefield and dies under their swords, I still admire him a little. Harada thought that the conflict between Takeda Su and Chuan would make his harassment of Chuan more favorable to Takeda Su, but unfortunately he was wrong. Fortunately, Takeda Su didn't even bother to pay a glance at him. At present, there is something more important waiting for him. The selection of the embassy attendants will begin tomorrow, and I would like to arrange for 3 people to come with me. Takeda Su drank all the tea in his cup. The middle-aged man thought for a moment and said, are you talking about Shin Jijia, Musashi, and Yi Yu? It's a bit difficult. Although you're guaranteed to enter the mission, Musashi and Shin Jijia's strength may still be difficult to pass the selection. Perhaps Yi Yu has a certain chance. It's not that the selection scope for this operation won't be very large, are there still many people who pose a threat to us? Takeda Su calculated in his heart, and at this time, there aren't many idle experts in the resistance army. You also heard Harada's words just now, and the Carp squad will also participate in the selection of the mission. If Chuan and Komura Nagahiro participate, you may not be easily selected. You and Yi Yu can talk about it, but Musashi and Shinji may not be sure. Those damn bastards. Takeda Su clenched his hands into a fist. What do you say, Mr. Ikijin? Haruhara Ichiro smiled calmly and took a sip of his tea. Don't worry, Lord Su, Lord Changguang has sent me to assist you. I am here to help you solve the problem. He smoothed out the wrinkles on his sleeves and said in an orderly manner, since it is destined that there will be no good between us and Chuan and others, then let's take them first and kick them out of the selection. After speaking, he slowly took out a jade scroll from his sleeve. Chapter 3. Selection Start. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shinhai. Readers greatly seek bookshelves and pursue more tightly. The next morning, Chuan got up from the bed. If it were in the past, lying inside this fragrant and soft cotton wool, with reinforced concrete everywhere outside, it would have no interest in waking up. Perhaps after changing the environment, people have also undergone corresponding changes. Nowadays, Chuan seems to be full of energy and has an inexhaustible spirit. A slight noise woke up the sister next door, and a faint voice came out through the door. Ogawa. Sister, I'm out of here. There's something going on in the barracks today. Barracks. You were injured just right, so they called you over again. That's too much. The voice suddenly woke up, rising 8 decibels, and the rustling sound of dressing came. Chuan nodded loudly. His sister usually takes great care of her predecessor and has always had some objections to her younger brother's silent participation in the resistance army. She has worked as a witch at the Coral Palace Shrine for some years, which can be considered her old qualifications. The so-called vase statement made by Harada yesterday is also a term used by some military personnel to refer to witches. After all, among the islands of Inami, witches are the facade of the shrine. They are responsible for both the affairs of the islands, big and small, and also participate in diplomacy. However, as the rebel forces gradually gained momentum on Haiji Island, some things changed their taste. Those soldiers acknowledge the reputation of the Coral Palace Heart Sea, but do not recognize the witch group, believing that these soldiers are the facade of the island. However, they were unaware that many things related to finance, politics, personnel, and so on were all controlled by witches. In short, my older sister is by no means a fuel-efficient lamp. Although she can be said to be extremely protective of herself, if she discovers her identity as a passerby, excessive indulgence may turn into deep longing for her younger brother, blackening it out. At worst, it is possible to behead him and prove himself. Therefore, recently, Chuan has been trying his best to avoid his sister and find ways to play his role well. It's getting late, sister. I'll leave first. Breakfast is on the table, you can eat while it's hot. As his sister was about to leave, Chuan grabbed the army sword leaning against the chair and ran out in a flash. Hey, wait. The sound of the door opening just now and the sound of the door closing that had already ended covered my sister's astonishment. A graceful figure stood at the door of the room, staring at the steaming bird egg roast on the table, with a momentary bewilderment on her face. After a moment, Lu Zi drummed her mouth and ate breakfast seriously, stomping her feet in anger. The craftsmanship is getting better and better, why are people becoming more and more disobedient? Walking on the village path paved with stone slabs, it was early morning and there were quite a few pedestrians on the road. The living time here was still in a relatively healthy state, but the number of women I saw was actually more than men. It's normal to think about it. Currently, the main employment directions for adult males on Haizhua Island seem to be fishing, farming, doing business, and joining the military. Except for farming, the other three have to leave their hometowns, so it is reasonable for women to have a higher proportion. Due to the war, the condition of the pedestrians on the road is not good, even if their worries are not written on their faces, there are not many smiles. Seeing this, Chuan's pace couldn't help but quicken a bit. It's coming soon, the war will end soon. Coming out of the village, heading west, bypassing the Coral Palace Shrine, and walking up a small hill surrounded by dense trees on three sides, this is the site of an old shrine. Walking further southwest, the shadows of more than 10 Taoist figures gradually came into view. Brother Chuan, you came so late. Chuan, like before when he went to school and work, would gather acquaintances for group activities. His gaze was wandering around, and Changyu had already leaned in. You came so early, Chuan was somewhat surprised. This is not a small scene, let alone the opportunity to participate in the mission to the shogunate. With the personal guidance of Master Kitagawa, it is said that Lord Coral Palace and Lord Goro will also be present today. When talking about the last two names, Changyu's eyes were filled with enthusiasm. Think about it, besides the time when we officially became members of the Special Operations Team, there was also the time when the team was damaged and disbanded. How could we have seen these two before? Chuan was taken aback and said, is it so rare? He immediately regained his senses. Indeed, from an ordinary person's perspective, Coral Palace Shinhai and Wulong were already at the highest level on Heizashima Island. Even though they respected the virtuous and virtuous officials, and did everything themselves, with so many people on Heizashima Island, it wouldn't take long to see each other. Chuan, have you burned your brain while practicing swordsmanship? Twice. Twice. Do you think it's a lot? Or are you saying that Lord Coral Palace and Lord Wulong are hindering your practice of that broken sword? From Chuan's perspective, Changyu was so angry that his eyes burst with blood and his head grew bigger. Oh. It seems like you two are talking about something interesting. While Changyu was blowing hair, a feminine voice came from behind them like foam rippling in the waves. At the moment of hearing the haunting words of tens of thousands of young male islanders, Changyu suddenly turned around like a spring and swayed like a gust of wind. Coral. Big. Big. He hadn't finished his first sentence yet, perhaps because he was too excited or wanted to explain what he had just said. In short, his breath was too heavy, and he shamelessly hiccuped. Fortunately, Chuan was quick, covering the mouth of this unlucky child. But he himself is not much better. The word heart-see came out of my mouth, and I suddenly realized it was not right. In a hurry, I couldn't think of any remedial measures, so I pretended to take it naturally. Good morning, 3 adults. We were just discussing some topics about this selection. Heart. The 3 people who walked up were Coral Palace Shinhai, Goro, and Kitagawa Nagahiro, who were responsible for the assessment. They had a slight doubt about Chuan's words, but they didn't even associate it with the fact that this kid privately called him Shinhai by his first name. Really, I seem to have heard my own name just now, Coral Palace Shinhai said with a smile. Her attitude was very easygoing, but her words made Chuan and Changyu's heads grow bigger. Cough, this. Fortunately, just as the two were embarrassed, the crowd behind them also promptly discovered the 3 people from the Coral Palace who had just appeared here. Several high-ranking soldiers hurriedly walked over and saluted the 3 of them. After a brief greeting to them at the Heart Sea of the Coral Palace, Goro stood up at the right time. Alright, without further ado, I gathered everyone here this morning for the selection of the mission. Time is running out, let's start as soon as possible. The liaison in charge of selection immediately guided the 3 people, and everyone crowded towards the prepared makeshift venue. Not far from Chuan Changyu, Takeda Su and others were also among them. Since seeing Coral Palace Shinhai take the initiative to talk to these 2 people earlier, his gloomy face can no longer be hidden. Chuan, it seems you must die. Takeda Su's left hand was hanging at his waist, gently gripping a grey jade stone. In his dark eyes, there was a surge of killing intent. Chapter 4. Beichuan Changguang. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De Co Lois Ara Trong Quatrin Lay Text. Chapter 5. For Shocking Skills. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The astonishment of the crowd did not last long. They were all people who had experienced the polishing of the battlefield and had strong control over their own emotions. Moreover, although he has never seen Beichuan Changguang take action, the identity of the founder of the Abyssal Sea Flow, the chief instructor of the resistance army, has always been well known to all the people of Haiji Island. After Beichuan Changguang took this step, no one dared to face the selection with a relaxed attitude on the field anymore. A sense of solemnity surged from everyone. Tsk tisk, that's just a bit more presentable. Feeling the changing state of the soldiers in front of him, Master Beichuan nodded secretly. At least he had put in some effort to show his hand, which was considered to have achieved the desired effect. On the seats outside, Coral Palace Shinhai watched this scene with a faint smile. The slightly raised curve between the pink lips was enough to stir the hearts of everyone on the field. Fortunately, everyone present was attracted by Beichuan Changguang, but they did not see this stunning scene. After taking this step, Kitagawa Nagahiro did not show any more skills. Instead, his aura returned to calmness. If it weren't for that moment earlier, showing it to others would probably have thought he was just an ordinary bad old man. He casually drew his long sword and waved it, and Beichuan Changguang looked into the field. So, who will come first? The breath of the crowd froze for a moment. This selection is not that simple, the first question is that it has already appeared. Can't you get on? Faced with an unfamiliar and unknown strong enemy, the first to take action will inevitably have the greatest disadvantage. If one is not good, it may even be unable to withstand a single move and will be defeated. In this way, the probability of being selected as an 8 player will be greatly reduced. But from a different perspective, being the first to take action, this attitude of daring to face difficulties and leading the way, will also be shown in the eyes of the 2 high-ranking rebel forces on and off the field. Even if they fail, it will not be a bad thing. After a slight hesitation, someone quickly stepped forward. I'll do it. In a slightly advanced position, a slightly older man walked forward. It's Pu Shang, the captain of the Ink Fish First Team. Quickly, someone recognized him and whispered from behind. I know him. Recently, He was mainly active in the southern wing of the resistance army and defeated 2 prominent shogunate warriors on the battlefield, achieving remarkable military achievements. The elite warriors recruited by the shogunate are extremely powerful, and ordinary soldiers in the resistance army cannot resist them. Generally speaking, only when a whole special operations team joins forces can they have the opportunity to leave behind a famous warrior on the battlefield, and it is evident that Urakami has defeated 2 of them alone, demonstrating his strength. Chuan and Changyu whispered behind the crowd. This guy, among these people on the field, his strength can definitely rank in the top 10. The Moyu Yifun team has recently completed an important task and is now taking a break. Urakami did manage to catch up this time. Let's first see what he can do with Master Beichuan. Except for those from Takeda, if anyone else has the opportunity to become colleagues, Chuan naturally hopes that their strength will be as strong as possible. Let's take action, said Master Beichuan with his long sword pointing to the ground, smiling as he looked at Urakami. Since that's the case, I'll ask the master to teach me. Urakami drew his long sword, bowed to Master Beichuan first, and then spread his posture. It was the start of the water spin slash. With just one glance, Chuan could see the reason behind Pu Shang's move. Besides him, others also gradually realized this move. He actually mastered the water spinning slash, which is the second most difficult skill among the 5 deadly moves of the abyss and seas flow, someone exclaimed in shock. If this move is released, even the Beichuan master would probably have to take it seriously. The abyss and seas flow has 12 basic moves and 5 killing moves. Although it is essentially a slightly simpler genre, mainly prepared for resistance soldiers without a foundation in swordsmanship, the 5 killing moves are not something that idle people can learn. The wave killing used in the previous Harada surprise attack is a typical example of not being trained to the point where the pace and luck are all in a mess, which is why Chuan gave him a backhand second. And here in Urakami, it is obviously different from Harada's situation. His bowing posture is more smooth and natural, integrating offense and defense. Even if he is not facing him directly, the people around him feel an invisible pressure. It seems that Master Beichuan may not be able to win easily either. Changyu was somewhat gloating, not because he had any opinions about Master Beichuan, but mainly with a lively attitude. However, Chuan, who was standing beside him, shook his head and smiled, saying, Pu Shang's style is quite imaginative. Changyu was taken aback by the words and said, his action is definitely thoroughly studied by the water spinning slash. At this level, is it still a pipe dream? Chuan nodded and said, if it were in a duel with people of the same level, this style might give enough pressure. Unfortunately, Master Beichuan is already the founder of the abyssal current, and attacking with such an obvious posture is simply a show of skill. Sure enough, during their conversation, Urakami had already drawn his sword and rushed out, his long sword sweeping across, his body carrying strong control as if rolling up a domineering vortex in mid-air. On the other hand, on the side of Master Beichuan, the old god still stood calmly on the ground, as if he didn't even intend to lift his sword. Urakami was pleasantly surprised by this scene. In his opinion, given such a chance, he could easily win the victory in this assessment. The sword light flashed in an instant, and an incredibly sharp aura blew in front of Beichuan Changguang. And next, a series of actions by Kitagawa Nagahiro directly startled the entire soldiers on the field, causing their chins to fall off. I saw him standing straight, facing the dazzling sword light without any panic, and taking another step. This step is different from just now, it is just an extremely ordinary step. However, it passes through layers of dazzling sword light in the midst of many horrified gazes and appears directly behind Urakami. How could this be possible? Those with shallower levels of the city government couldn't help but scream in surprise. The battle had not stopped yet. After stepping out, Kitagawa Nagahiro raised his long sword still in its sheath and lightly turned towards Urakami, who was trying to deal with him. Then, he withdrew his hand and leaned left, dodging Urakami's stunning counterattack. At this moment, under the gaze of everyone, Kitagawa Nagahiro raised his sword and lightly tapped Urakami's left arm, which he couldn't retract. At this moment, Urakami's brain had already been a bit paralyzed, and the long sword still followed suit, sweeping past after slashing. This time, Beichuan Changguang stood straight in place, with his long sword still unsheathed in his hand. With just a lift of his arm, the sword was firmly blocked in his ear. To the right was Urakami's stagnant body. Because at the moment he landed, before he could retract, the incredibly swift tip of the sword had already pressed against his throat. As soon as the people in the venue react, the old and casual voice spreads. Next. Chapter 6. Water Release. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Number 34, next number 34, a plain voice echoed in everyone's ears, but needles could be heard falling on the field. How can we fight this? Among the more than 20 people present, Urakami's level is definitely at the top, and his proficiency and precision in using the water spin slash have surpassed the vast majority of viewers. However, even such a master cannot even make Master Beichuan draw his sword. What a gap this is! There is probably an insurmountable gap between the strength of the two. The Coral Palace Heart Sea and Goro, who had been sitting in the back watching, also sighed in their hearts. The lack of available talents on Haiji Island has never been a humble word. The uprising of the resistance army was too short, and as a remote area for Inazumi, Hazashima Island itself is not the first choice for most people's development. Even many locals have left for survival, so how many talents can be left behind? Recently, they have won numerous battles, which has led many people to have the illusion that their side can confront the shogunate head-on. But only high-level officials like Coral Palace Shinhai and Goro are aware of it. In order to achieve victory in these few wars, they put in a lot of effort and tactics to barely win. Nowadays, both the economy and food supply of Haiji Island are already struggling, while the shogunate is in a relatively painless state. If we continue to fight like this, the resistance army will inevitably fall into an irreversible situation. This mission is actually a desperate gamble. Is there no one left? Beichuan Changguang said calmly with his eyes slightly closed. Behind everyone, Chuan remained silent. Beichuan Changguang's skills were extremely terrifying. If he stood out now, he might only be beaten. In a moment, a person gritted their teeth and stood up, bowing to Master Beichuan, saying, "Master, please teach me." Beichuan Changguang slowly lifted his head and slightly nodded his chin. "I'm pretty good at it." That person wielded his sword, but unfortunately, his level was clearly not as good as the previous Urakami, and he could only barely use one of the 5 deadly moves. His defeat came even more rapidly. With just one move, he lost his balance due to the influence of Beichuan Changguang's movements, fell to the ground, and then his unsheathed long sword fell on his chest. Next, the third person, the fourth person, the fifth person. After defeating so many candidates in a very short time, Beichuan Changguang shook his head and said to the crowd at the venue, "On this trip to Mingshan Island, although we mainly discuss cooperation with some clan sects, it is inevitable to encounter some young talents who have been carefully trained by the family. At that time, it will be you who need to compete with them." He paused and continued, "At the negotiation table, strength is paramount. If our elite soldiers who resist the army do not even have the strength to compete with those young heroes, how can those clans and sects support us?" At this point, some young people who were eager to try before have silently lowered their heads and clenched their fists, feeling somewhat unwilling. However, before the atmosphere continued to plummet, Kitagawa Nagahiro's words changed and he said, "You haven't practiced martial arts since you were young. It's not easy for you to reach this level in such a short period of time. Therefore, it's not impossible to continue to fight, defeat, or even surpass those geniuses. However, the next path requires you to be more determined, hardworking, and quick to unleash your potential in order to move forward." Many people looked up at the words, with scorching flames emanating from their eyes. "That's right, I will climb higher and use my extraordinary strength to control those mediocre people and lead the battle. No one can stop me on this path." Takeda roared inwardly on the edge of the field. On the other side, Chuan also clenched his hands and looked ahead. "I came to this world not for the sake of mediocrity, to be lost in the crowd. I will fill in the regrets in the story with my hands one by one." After once again inspiring the extraordinary fighting spirit, Beichuan Changguang finally pulled out his long sword in his hand, and a strong and powerful aura rushed towards everyone. "Next, I will not hold back. Those who enter the field should give their all in their best form, otherwise the result may not be as you wish." Boom! The battle bell rang once again, and in this morning, the selection of the future cornerstone of Haiji Island was in full swing. The sound of swords and knives intertwined from a distance reached the ears of Heart Sea and Goro in the Coral Palace, but their emotions were somewhat relieved. Master Beichuan does have his own unique talent cultivation skills. Lord Coral Palace is truly insightful. Having such a master has relieved a lot of pressure in our army. The serious tone of the young man sounded, and this was the voice of Goro. Coral Palace Heart Sea naturally knew that this was a heartfelt praise from Goro, and there was no need for deliberate flattery between them. So she also pursed her lips and smiled lightly. Master Beichuan's understanding of swords is indeed no less than that of the old clans on Mingshan Island. Although it may not be a good thing to say so, it is thanks to the exclusion of those people that our island, Haiji Island, was able to invite such a master-level offering. "I hope there will be some gains from this selection," Goro nodded. On the shogunate side, there is still a continuous increase in troops, and they have also hired many famous warriors from major sects and clans. If it weren't for General Thunderbolt staying in seclusion, there would be some animosity among the three followers, and I'm afraid that guy would react faster. Upon hearing this, a hint of solemnity flashed in Coral Palace's Shinhai's eyes. Jushiaxia is indeed talented. If she were to take full control of the heavenly leader and follow him now, the pressure on our resistance army would greatly increase. Their next words were also detached from the small matter of selection. After all, for them, there are too many things to deal with, such as the livelihood of Haiji Island, the deployment of the resistance army, and the subsequent attack and defense plans. In the sea island where talent is extremely scarce, even if they sit here, the complexity of the things they handle in their minds will not be lower than the pressure faced by the sergeant who was assessed by Kitagawa Nagara on the field. Time passed by bit, and soon, almost all of these 20 or so people were assessed. At this moment, the group of people from Takeda village, who had not moved for a long time, stood outside the field and finally stepped forward. In the rear, Chuan and Changyu also had a fixed gaze. Finally, it's their turn. However, just after Takeda Market came on stage, the incident happened again. Bang! I saw Takeda take action with just one move and then defeat the formation from Kitagawa Nagi. What is he doing? Changyu said incredulously. Chuan also frowned. With the strength of Takeda, he can at least play a few rounds against Kitagawa Nagi, and it is more than enough to advance to the top 8. What does it mean to be defeated in battle now? Just as they were paying attention to Takeda-su's side, the defeated Takeda-su lowered his head and murmured coldly in a low voice. Chuan, I have already taken this step to destroy you. Don't let me down, that's right. Chapter 7. Chuan's Attack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first 8 defenders are destined to not see each other among these 8 people. In order to compete with Chuan, Takeda-su gave up his position in the top 8 and instead challenged Chuan in the subsequent attack and challenge. At this point, some people who are familiar with the strength of Takeda village also expressed doubts. However, Takeda-su's trip was too abstract, and even the targeted Chuan was not understood for a moment. However, these voices were transmitted to the ears of the wise and clever girl in the back, causing a hint of contemplation to flicker in her amber-like eyes. Musashi, you go. When he returned to Takeda village in the small group and looked up again, there was no longer any color on his face, and he said calmly. "Yes, sir." Behind him, a big man took orders and walked forward. Not long after, the big man walked back with a rather embarrassed expression. In fact, anyone who has fought against Beichuan Changguang clearly has a deeper feeling of that kind of oppression. Before the battle, no matter how much you fear and value it, you cannot feel the feeling that all your actions are being seen through, and each step of yourself is several times slower than the opponent. Under such heavy pressure, even if you stand still, as long as you have a heart that wants to continue fighting, you will find it difficult to take the next step. Next, from the Takeda market camp, Jia will come on stage. This is a person of the same age as Urakami, and he has also mastered various killing moves. Unfortunately, in front of Beichuan Changguang in a sword-drawn state, he only managed to hold out 2 rounds. Sir, Jia returned and humbly knelt down to apologize to Takeda Su. In this battle, he had not yet had the chance to perform to his full potential. Takeda Su did not pay attention to him, but instead looked into the field, where the strongest of his subordinates stood beside him. You must take the top 8 seats. Takeda Su squinted his eyes and muttered silently. He gave up the top 8 to deal with Chuan, but the rewards that these top 8 can obtain cannot be easily ignored. Besides him, only you can consistently secure the top 8 spots. Soon, the battle began. The sword light flickered, and in the shocked eyes of everyone, Yu actually used 3 killing moves, supporting 6 rounds in front of Beichuan Changguang. Many viewers in the audience exclaimed in amazement. Without a doubt, Yu indeed has a certain level of strength. After 6 rounds, it was almost a record of dominating the entire game. Even the strongest rebel centurion before only supported 6 rounds. After the battle ended, Yu walked back to his camp. Takeda Su patted his shoulder and said, "Well done." Yu quickly bowed and replied, "Thank you for nurturing me, sir." At this point, only the last 2 people remained on the field. "Brother Chuan, then I'll go first." Changyu moved his shoulders and his gaze gradually solidified. "Go ahead, calm down and stop when it's time," Chuan said. Changyu nodded and walked forward. Buzz. Just as Changyu approached, Chuan suddenly felt a slight dizziness in his brain. This sudden dizziness made him feel a bit unstable in place. "What's going on?" Chuan changed his face and instantly calmed down, feeling the problem on his body. However, after a while, the dizziness disappeared completely and the source could not be found. Chuan's face looked a bit ugly, but after feeling it carefully for a moment, he finally returned in vain. Perhaps it was the aftermath of that fainting. Without a clue, he could only attribute this dizziness to a historical legacy. After giving up the pursuit of the crux, he once again turned his gaze to the field, and by this time, the battle was rapidly approaching its end. Changyu has already shown 2 killing moves, namely his most commonly used Shan Higui and Pu Shang's previously used water spin slash. However, in the face of the creator of the abyssal current, these 2 killing moves have had little effect. As long as there is any delay in the transformation, it will be broken by Beichuan Changguang. In the end, Changyu's strength was not enough to continue and he was defeated in the battle. "Not bad," said Beichuan Changguang with satisfaction. Playing against him for 5 rounds is already a good result, and these 2 killing moves are also well combined, ranking in the top 8. Upon hearing this, Changyu also showed a happy expression on his face. Fortunately, his efforts were not in vain. He returned to the side of Chuan with a disheveled face but brisk steps. "Brother Chuan, it's up to you." TSK, Chuan looked at the guy's face, as if those teachers had answered the question by name, and he turned his hand to his brother and said the next question to his friend. So, under the gaze of Changyu, who was half expecting to watch the play, Chuan finally stretched his arms and slowly walked forward facing Beichuan Changguang. At this moment, the morning sunshine is just right, and warm-colored light shines through the forest, shining on the straight bodies of the young people. Former Carp team leader, Chuan, please ask Master Beichuan for guidance. A confident and powerful laughter drifted out, sweeping away the deliberate momentum of Beichuan Changguang. As soon as this voice was heard, it immediately boosted the spirits of both inside and outside the venue. Even Coral Palace Xinhai and Goro, who were sitting in their seats, coincidentally cast their gaze upon them. Good kid. With just one sentence, Beichuan Changguang couldn't help but secretly appreciate it. However, whether your strength is strong or not can be demonstrated through such skillful skills. Next, let me see how much weight you have. This damn guy. Takeda Su had a keen eye, and seeing the gaze that even Goro and Coral Palace Xinhai had invested in, he naturally knew that Chuan's simple words gave him a big score. Moreover, every time Coral Palace's heart seat cast its gaze towards Chuan, a jealous anger gushed out of his heart. As a member of the Hainan Island Rebellion, I have to say that I am not interested in that gentle and agile girl who combines intelligence and gentleness unless it's non-tongue. Although Takeda village is tall and muscular, it is obvious that he is not. Who? After a brief greeting, Chuan sank his mind, lifted his breath, drew his sword, and slowly stabilized his figure. What a ghost! But after seeing Chuan's inexplicable and wonderful posture, all the soldiers were stunned, and Changyu almost cursed out loud. Big brother, you can practice with me on the school field and just play. In the face of such an important selection, are you playing with your tricks? Wanduzi, Wanduzi. Changyu's mentality instantly collapsed, wishing he could collapse on the ground and love anyone. Despite the surprised expressions of others, Chuan said to Beichuan Changguang, Master Beichuan, please. After speaking, he stood still and remained motionless. After a few seconds, the others slowly reacted. This guy is actually asking Master Beichuan to take the initiative. Boom! The thunderous sound could no longer stop echoing throughout the entire room. Chapter 8. Found Treasure. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. What is Chuan doing? There were people on the field who knew Chuan, but they all had doubts about Chuan's actions. It's probably because they knew they were losing to Master Beichuan and were trying to figure out these sensationalist things, someone sneered. Even Goro and Coral Palace Heart Sea, who were sitting outside, had a momentary illusion of this guy being flashy and unreal. But when they saw the gradually solemn expression on Kitagawa Nagahiro's face, this illusion disappeared completely. Facing Beichuan Changguang in front of Chuan, he slowly narrowed his eyes as he looked at the young man in front of him in an unnamed posture. Having studied swordsmanship for many years, he could naturally see that although his posture was awkward, it had a unique charm, as if he was accumulating momentum and ready to charge forward at any time, without moving forward. This posture has no defense to speak of, and at first glance it is full of flaws, but there is an indescribable strange feeling that has been lingering in the heart of Beichuan Changguang. It's been a long time since young people dared to let me attack in front of me. Beichuan Changguang smiled calmly. Since that's the case. His body suddenly sank, like a huge wave pressing down on the top, carrying an incredibly strong wind and rushing towards him in an instant. Let me see what you really have. Boom. It's the wave killing. This blow is too iconic. It was made by Kitagawa Nagahiro, which is completely different from others. The immense sense of oppression is something that others cannot imitate. How did he block this blow? Some viewers asked. It's over. Someone directly issued a critical illness notice. Takeda Su sneered in his heart. Even if he were eliminated, the trash shouldn't stay here. In the next round of selection, Lord Coral Palace will naturally know who is the strongest. Surprisingly, it was the wave killing. Chuan secretly said good luck in his heart. Why did Beichuan Changguang take action? Because after watching so many scenes, Chuan is clear that his understanding of the abyssal current is undoubtedly the first. If he knows how to use his moves, he will naturally be able to break them. Under this premise, as long as you make a move to use the abyssal current against Beichuan Changguang, the next move will inevitably be clearly calculated by the opponent. It can be said that as long as you make a move, you lose half. Those who can unleash several killing moves and fight against the enemy for several rounds against Beichuan Changguang are actually the result of Beichuan Changguang deliberately feeding them moves. So although he didn't realize it was fierce, what Takeda Su gave up was actually a precious opportunity personally provided by Kitagawa Nagahiro. If Beichuan Changguang takes action seriously, even if he kills, he may still be able to defeat it with one blow. Therefore, taking a backhand is actually the best means of counterbalance. Moreover, I have not yet figured out how to take the initiative with my steel-cutting flash. Thinking of this, Chuan also had a hint of a bitter smile. Fortunately, the sneak attack in front of Harada gave him a deeper understanding of steel shine. At this moment, facing the wave killing of Beichuan Changguang, he was also able to fight. Shua. In an instant, lightning and flint. Just as everyone thought that Master Beichuan was making a full effort and the battle was over, a fierce and unparalleled wind suddenly shot out, accurately hitting the long sword of Beichuan Changguang. That towering wave-like momentum was pierced and scattered into nothingness. At this moment, even the heart sea of Coral Palace widened its pink-blue eyes slightly, and the audience on stage couldn't react. However, the fighter jet was fleeting and the opportunity could not be let go. At the moment when Beichuan Changguang stopped, Chuan moved. He was short in stature, with a long sword relay in his hand, and quickly pushed himself forward. His feet crossed, and his whole body rotated the sword light at a delicate angle. Is this water spin slash? Wu Lang said somewhat uncertain from his seat. As a general of the resistance army, he naturally also practiced the abyssal current, and this momentum and action are clearly the water spin slash. But why did this guy's water spin slash start so quickly? Bang! Beichuan Changguang is truly a master of swordsmanship, and his response is extremely ingenious. Just as the long sword was blocked, he noticed the movements of Chuan's feet. Like Chuan, he also used his strength in an instant to control his body, take a step back, leave enough distance, and respond quickly to receive Chuan's counterattack. But Chuan will never miss such a wonderful opportunity. If the opportunity is already in hand, he will suppress it to death. His water whirl slashed halfway, but unexpectedly came to a standstill. With his long sword in hand, he suddenly rose up from the ground with a swift and violent gust of wind. Hanging waterfall. In the eyes of Kitagawa Nagahiro, the most difficult killing move to learn in the abyssal currents was finally used by someone, and surprisingly, it was used with the ease of changing moves. This time, I found a treasure. This powerful attack is launched from such a cunning angle that even Beichuan Changguang can only slightly dodge it. However, it was the 2 steps he took back that caused a commotion among the more than 20 soldiers on the field. I didn't read it wrong, did I? Master Beichuan was unexpectedly expelled. This is the worship of Haiji Island and the chief instructor of the resistance army. Regardless of his status, none of the more than 20 people just now can walk more than 10 rounds on him. It can be seen how far the strength gap between Master Beichuan and these people is. However, it is such a master who is now being suppressed and beaten by Chuan. It's not over yet. Chuan's killing energy overflowed, and he was extremely focused at this moment, as if possessed by the thunder god. The momentum of his long sword remained strong, and his whole body followed the hanging waterfall into the air, pressing down horizontally towards the long light of Beichuan. Another move. Wave killing. Wu Lang clenched his hands and looked at Chuan, his gaze no longer on a special combat team captain, but on a huge precious treasure chest. This person can already be included in the key training list of Hainan Island and become the backbone of Hainan Island in the future, sharing the pressure for him. Coral Palace Xinhai's eyes also flickered with brilliance. She nodded lightly and said, Chuan's abyssal currents have been practiced so skillfully. The last bit of casualness in Beichuan Changguang's gaze finally dissipated at this moment, and he whispered to himself, water spin slash. Boom. Lang Tao killed against Shuexian slash, two killing moves collided, and Chuan finally stopped his momentum and stopped in front of Beichuan Changguang. At this moment, neither side will give the phone a chance. The two of them fired at the same time, and Chuan put on a water spin chopping start. Beichuan Changguang stepped forward with his long sword straight out, without any moves, purely piercing the heart of Chuan. And this pure stabbing can just break through the accumulated momentum of Chuan's water spiral slash. However, at this moment, a smile appeared on the corner of Chuan's mouth as his strategy was successful. I was deceived. Chapter 9. Entering the first 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As Chuan's smile appeared, the long sword in his hand also changed its momentum, stacked towards the long sword stabbed by Beichuan Changguang, and opened it, fiercely attacking and killing Beichuan Changguang. The most useless killing move in the abyss and seas, Broken Stream Scrolls, has had a miraculous effect at this moment. Stinky kid. Beichuan Changguang was once again taken aback by carelessness and retreated. They were playing fiercely, and the situation outside was already chaotic. Everyone was amazed by the strength displayed by Chuan at this moment. So far, Chuan and Beichuan Changguang have been fighting head-on for at least 10 rounds, and Beichuan Changguang has been at a disadvantage throughout the entire process, retreating step by step, and now they have reached the edge of the field. Damn it! Brother Chuan. So fierce. Changyu's mouth opened so wide that he could even squeeze an apple. Now he seemed to be dreaming. How could his companions around him still chat and fart with him 1 second ago, and then take off his clothes the next second? He changed into a bottomed underwear and wore a combat tight-fitting shirt with an S tattoo on his chest, which took off in the air. Damn it! On the other hand, Takeda Su's emotions were not so good. His gaze was gloomy like water at the moment, and his killing intent surged. This guy has already trained the abyssal current to this extent. What news did Harada, that useless person, inquire about? Even with Chuan's current level, it may be difficult for him to benefit from it. It seems that we can only use this one. This time, we must make him stand up again. He hung his left hand at his waist, holding a grey jade talisman tightly. Beichuan Changguang didn't expect that among the 20 or so sheep, there was actually a real tiger mixed in. He is already highly experienced in combat, and even with Chuan's fierce attacks and top-notch calculations and tactics, he has not been able to truly defeat him in such a disarray. It was just a few steps back and easily resolved those moves. However, this is not a general duel. As the chief instructor of the resistance army, what he wants is to achieve the effect of suppressing the entire scene. Now being pushed to the edge of the field, it can be said that if we take another step back, we will lose face. Ah, this kid. Kitagawa Nagahiro was also a bit angry, and this kid didn't leave a step for himself at all. On the other side, Chuan is still fully focused on attacking. You should know that his judgment of Beichuan Changguang is a top swordsmanship master. Once given a chance to fight back, he may not be able to do it himself. He never expected to go into the realm of worldly wisdom. So, Beichuan Changguang felt a bit helpless. Although this move may seem like a defeat, he still had to establish himself in the resistance army, and his reputation could not be lost. Faced with a fierce attack from Chuan, Beichuan Changguang suddenly raised his hand and drew a mysterious arc with his sword, precise and rapid. Chuan felt a sword shadow flash past his eyes, and in an instant, the figure of Beichuan Changguang disappeared from his sight. He was immediately shocked when he realized it. Bang! The next moment, a huge force kicked him on the buttocks, and his figure became unstable. To his surprise, he fell off the field and threw himself into the mud. Not far in front of him, sitting in the coral palace, Xinhai couldn't help but cover his mouth and chuckle lightly. Chuan actually forced out the school of the Beichuan master's family, but the ending was a bit out of style. She naturally saw that in this note by Kitagawa Nagahiro, he was no longer using the slightly inferior abyssal current, but rather his own unique skill. However, the way Chuan fell and chewed on the mud at this moment was somewhat contrasting with his previous tall and loose posture. Next to him, Wu Lang also smiled and said, Chuan did indeed perform very well this time. At this level, I'm afraid even within the clans and sects of Mingshan Island, one can compete with their excellent disciples. Chuan awkwardly got up from the ground, turned around, and Beichuan Changguang had already collected his sword and stood still. This battle has come to an end here. After all, Chuan's defeat can be said to have left countless loopholes for Beichuan Changguang to use as an assassin. Therefore, the outcome is already decided. After calming down some chaotic breathing, Chuan also withdrew his sword and bowed to Beichuan Changguang. Thank you for your guidance, Master Beichuan. Well, your level is very good. You have gained a far greater understanding than others on the abyssal currents. If you have any doubts in the future, feel free to come to me to help you answer them. Kitagawa Nagahiro also felt a bit helpless. Being forced out of his unique skills by this kid was actually a bit embarrassing. Even if others didn't say it, he still had a knot in his heart. However, the master still has a master's demeanor, and the main reason for this is that he took it lightly and was taken the lead twice. Therefore, facing such an outstanding genius, his tone is also exceptionally calm. The first round of selection has come to an end, and Kitagawa Nagahiro instructed everyone to rest separately. He himself also returned to the side of the Coral Palaces Shinkai and Goro. The choice of these first 8 people naturally needs to be discussed with the 2 of them. Chuan returned to Changyu and sat directly on the ground, organizing his muscle state and breathing. Use killing moves several times in a row, and still use transformation moves. This kind of movement still puts a considerable burden on one's own body. However, not long after, he was somewhat uncomfortable with the scorching gaze beside him and opened his eyes. I know I'm pretty this time, but you don't need to look at me like that, do you? Chuan said helplessly as he looked at Changyu's expression as if he was about to open his eyes. Brother Chuan, did you secretly practice when you didn't tell me? Said Changyu. Chuan looked innocent and said, I've been practicing all along. Didn't you keep saying that I'm not doing it right? Changyu was about to vomit blood, but he had nothing to say. It was indeed that he had been opposing what Chuanlian had come up with. After a long silence, Changyu said in a muffled voice, take me next time. Inside the venue, others were also secretly pondering who could become the 8 people selected. However, there is a name that no one can avoid. A constant gaze swept past Chuan's side. Others may still have controversy, but Chuan deserves it and firmly occupies the position of these 8 seats in a moment. Beichuan Changguang, who was talking to Coral Palace Xinhai and Goro, finally made a move. After receiving their nods, he stood up and walked towards the field amidst the rapidly gathering gaze of the crowd. The list of the top 8 people will be announced below. The moon is the main tree, the ancestral village is Yangping, the branches of the household are Jiantaro, Yugu Ming, Urakami Xiaotai, Guangcuan Changyu, Yi Yu, and Chuan. The 8 people who heard their names had different expressions, and Chuan and Changyu looked at each other and smiled. Not bad, everyone has entered. Next, let's move on to the second stage. You 8, in the 8 corners at the edge of the field, prepare to take on the challenge. The second stage of this selection is finally the beginning. As soon as Chuan stood still, he saw a burly figure and walked up to him. And his face gradually darkened. Your soul is lingering. Takeda Market. Chapter 10. Battle of Takeda Ruins. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. I've paid a considerable price to deal with you, Takeda Su said with a cold and fierce smile, his killing intent surging. So you're using such an abacus, Chuan immediately realized when he saw Takeda Su, wondering what Takeda Su's previous move of releasing water meant. I didn't expect that my position in the eyes of Captain Takeda would be even more important than an opportunity to meet the demands of the high-ranking rebels. He shook his head and smiled. Takeda Su, although quite powerful, his proficiency in the abyssal current is inferior to his previous skills. In the eyes of Chuan, he is useless except for being able to deceive his teammates and earn military achievements. Last time I was beaten into a dog by a famous samurai and lay in bed for a month or so. It seems that I still haven't helped you get rid of your aggressive bad habit, Takeda Su said indifferently. Chuan's face darkened. Although this happened before his time traveling, the death of a teammate and his own serious injury still brought him some emotional burden. Since I have taken over this body, many things naturally need to be taken over easily. Just like the former enemy of Takeda Market. Although I also dislike him very much. You can give it a try, even after lying in bed for a month or so, you can still get away from me. Chuan suddenly smiled, adjusting his mindset has always been his strength, and there is no need to think about the previous things at this time. Compared to being disgusted by others, it is still more comfortable to be disgusted. After all, you're just a mouse with a scumbag skill. Since you are so eloquent, then in the future, lie down in bed and rely on your mouth to make a living. Takeda Su's anger had reached its peak at this moment. Those who are capable of fighting on the battlefield will receive it, and it is their great honor that those weak and useless soldiers can help him consume a trace of the strength of famous warriors. What qualifications does Chuan have to pretend to be hypocritical on the battlefield and confront him everywhere? A long sword exuding a bloody and violent aura was slowly pulled out of its scabbard by him. On the blade tan, a black evil tiger opened its bloodthirsty mouth and firmly grasped the sharp blade. The tiger sword. Chuan's face also became solemn. He has been fighting against Takeda Su for quite some time now, and he is also very clear about the good sword that Takeda Su specifically sought out from a well-known swordsman named Takashi Sha. This sword is tailor-made for Takeda village, with top-notch weight, material, and feel, and extremely powerful killing power. It can be said that Takeda Su, who picked up this knife, probably had to increase his combat power by an order of magnitude. Takeda Su was too lazy to talk to him anymore, and he showed no mercy in his actions. The cold blade wind swept over with a bloody aura. Faced with this state of Takeda ruins, Chuan dared not underestimate, his gaze fixed, and he swung his sword to confront the enemy. Outside the venue, Beichuan Changguang sat back in his seat and watched the battle inside with Coral Palace Xinhai and Goro. It seems that everyone has little opinion on the top 8 seats. He glanced over and found that many people had a bitter smile on their faces, as if they had given up the subsequent competition. Obviously, they were also quite clear about the gap between themselves and these 8 people. Among these 8 people, only 3 are actually being challenged. Zongxuan Yangping and Urakami Xiaotai. These 2 are indeed slightly inferior in strength compared to the other 6, both only mastering 2 types of abyssal current killing moves, and they are not yet proficient. Looking further, Beichuan Changguang was taken aback. The last one to be challenged was actually Chuan, who performed the best in this selection, almost without any suspense. Moreover, that challenger has fought against him back and forth. Beichuan Changguang exclaimed, "It's interesting that this Takeda village didn't perform well before, but now suddenly found Chuan." Sitting next to him, Goro also smiled and explained, "Takeda Centurion is a newly promoted Centurion who has made outstanding achievements in the Northern Front. His own strength is also commendable. Perhaps he had some problems with his form when facing the Beichuan master just now. Captain Chuan seems to have a significant conflict with Captain Takeda," said Coral Palace Xinhai, who had been watching quietly, with a soft and gentle voice. "Oh." Goro frowned and looked over carefully. Indeed, upon closer inspection, Takeda Su's moves were deadly, all of which were fierce tactics, and Chuan's side did not hesitate at all. Unlike the sparring with Beichuan Changguang, in a normal battle, both sides were unharmed. It didn't take long for this to pass, and there were many blood wounds on both of the two people who were fiercely fighting. Bang! The swords intersected, and the two parted ways. Sliding back and forth like a loach, is that your confidence in speaking? Takeda sneered. Give me a handy weapon, I'll fight 10 of your kind, Chuan retorted unhappily. The tiger saber is countless times more powerful than the military weapon he has in his hand, to the point where he never dares to fully collide with the blade of Takeda's army, fearing that one collision will directly cut off his sword. Haha. Takeda sneered, ignoring Chuan's retort. He naturally wanted to make good use of his advantage. Number 34, if you only have this skill, lie down quickly. Number 34, as the words fell, the tiger's body in Takeda village trembled, and the long sword in his hand roared and waved several mournful sword lights, charging straight towards the river. Watching the countless water spin slashes that Takeda had seen today, Chuan's heart was moved. In the confrontation with Kitagawa Nagahiro just now, the water spin slash he used was pierced by Kitagawa Nagahiro's light and direct stab. Currently, Takeda-su's water spin slash has not even reached his level. Since that's the case, as long as he finds that flaw, he can also replicate the blow of Beichuan Changguang. Thinking of this, Chuan calmed his mind and faced the knife light rushing towards him in front, posing but no longer moving. His abnormal behavior quickly caused a crowd of onlookers in the venue to exclaim in surprise, many of whom had already given up the challenge. At this moment, they were all looking towards the most intense location of the battle. Beichuan Changguang sat in his seat, with a stronger appreciation for Chuan. This kid is too smart and full of courage. He is definitely a rare talent in the resistance army. Even if placed in those clans and sects, they can still afford strong training. However, this kind of loophole is not so easy to find. The sword light from Takeda village came in an instant and reached Chuan's body in an instant. Looking at the figure without any resistance, Takeda-su's eyes flickered with a fierce killing intent. The long sword swung towards Chuan without leaving any hand. Just as the knife light was about to strike Chuan's pupils suddenly widened, and both joy and coldness emerged. Since you want to fight with me so much, then I'll fulfill you.